The gunshot echoed across the plains like thunder, startling Sophia Vance from her reverie. She glanced up from her lesson plans, her heart pounding wildly against her chest as she stared out the schoolhouse window. Fort Garland, Colorado, 1876, a town that had promised her a fresh start, far from the painful memories of Boston, but one that had brought its own unique challenges. Another gunshot cracked the afternoon air, and Sophia flinched. She'd been in Fort Garland for nearly 6 months, but she still couldn't accustom herself to the casual violence that seemed to permeate the West like the dust that settled on everything. She rose from her desk, smoothing the wrinkles from her simple blue dress, and crossed to the window. In the distance, just beyond the edge of town, several men were engaged in target practice. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered, turned slightly, and Sophia caught a glimpse of a familiar profile, Zachary Nash, the enigmatic rancher who owned the sprawling property north of town. The man whose mere presence caused her pulse to quicken in a most inappropriate manner. Sophia turned away from the window, chastising herself for the blush that crept into her cheeks. At 22, she was hardly a schoolgirl to be mooning over a handsome face. Besides, as Fort Garland's schoolteacher, she had a position to maintain, a reputation to uphold. The town had entrusted their children to her care, and she would not betray that trust by engaging in romantic flights of fancy. She returned to her desk, determined to finish preparing tomorrow's lessons before the light faded. The small schoolhouse, with its rough-hewn walls and simple furnishings, had become her sanctuary in this unfamiliar land. Here, surrounded by books and the innocent curiosity of her students, she could almost forget the heartbreak that had driven her westward. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the schoolroom floor, Sophia found her thoughts drifting once more to her past. The letter had arrived that morning, crisp white paper, elegant handwriting. Her sister's familiar script bearing news she'd both expected and dreaded. Thomas was married. The man who had once promised her the world had given his name and his heart to another. The knowledge shouldn't hurt, not after what he'd done, and yet the pain was still there, a dull ache beneath her breastbone. She'd thought herself stronger, thought the distance and time had healed her wounds. She was wrong. The first tear fell unbidden, splashing onto the open geography book before her. Sophia brushed it away with trembling fingers, but another followed, and then another, until she could no longer stem the tide. 6 months of carefully maintained composure crumbled like sand, and Sophia buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She didn't hear the door open, didn't notice the shift in the air as someone entered the schoolhouse. It wasn't until a deep voice broke the silence that she realized she was no longer alone. "Miss Vance?" Sophia's head snapped up, mortification flooding her as she found herself staring into the concerned blue eyes of Zachary Nash. He stood just inside the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the setting sun, hat held respectfully in his hands. His dark hair was tousled from the wind, and there was a smudge of dirt on his jawline that only served to enhance his rugged appearance. "Mr. Nash," she managed, hastily wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. I didn't hear you come in." He remained where he was, as if uncertain whether to approach or retreat. "Door was open," he said simply, his voice carrying the slight drawl that marked him as not being Colorado-born. "I was passing by and heard." He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with mentioning her tears. Sophia rose from her chair, desperately trying to regain her composure. "Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Nash?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady despite the evidence of her distress still wet upon her cheeks. Zachary Nash took a step forward, then seemed to think better of it. He was a man unaccustomed to emotional displays, more at home on the open range than in the confines of the schoolhouse. Yet there was genuine concern in his eyes as he regarded her. "Are you all right, Miss Vance?" he asked finally. The simple question, asked with such evident sincerity, nearly undid her composure once more. Sophia turned away, busying herself with organizing papers that needed no organizing. "I'm perfectly fine, Mr. Nash," she lied. "Just a moment of weakness, nothing of importance." She heard his boots on the wooden floor moving closer. Not close enough to be improper, but near enough that she could detect the scent of leather and sun-warmed skin. "My ma used to say tears always have importance," he said quietly. "Said they're the words the heart can't speak." Sophia turned to face him, surprised by the unexpected poetry from a man known more for his skill with horses than his way with words. Zachary Nash stood before her, hat still in hand, his expression a mixture of concern and uncertainty. In that moment, with the golden light of sunset streaming through the windows, casting him in an almost ethereal glow, he looked nothing like the hardened rancher who occasionally came to town for supplies. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," Sophia said softly. A shadow passed over his features. "She was," he replied, and Sophia understood that his mother was no longer living. An uncomfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant call of a nighthawk as twilight descended. "I should be going," Sophia said finally, gathering her shawl from the back of her chair. "It's getting late." Zachary nodded, stepping aside to allow her passage to the door. "May I walk you home, Miss Vance?" he asked, the formal request at odds with the rough exterior of the man. "It's not proper for a lady to be out alone after dark." Sophia hesitated. The boarding house where she lived was only a short distance away, but the streets of Fort Garland could be unpredictable after sundown, particularly on days when the cattle drivers passed through. Still, to accept his escort might cause talk, and as the town's teacher she was held to a higher standard than most. Before she could respond, voices drifted in from outside, loud, boisterous, slurred with drink. The cattle drivers had arrived. "I would appreciate your escort, Mr. Nash," she said quickly. Decision made. He nodded, settling his hat back on his head and offering her his arm with unexpected gallantry. Sophia took it, feeling the solid strength of him through the rough fabric of his shirt, and allowed him to lead her from the schoolhouse. The walk to the boarding house was mercifully uneventful. Zachary kept a respectful distance while still providing the security of his presence, and Sophia found herself grateful for his silent companionship. When they reached the steps of Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, she turned to thank him. "I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Nash," she said, meaning it sincerely. He tipped his hat, his eyes catching the light from the lantern that hung beside the door. "No need for thanks, Miss Vance. It was my pleasure." He turned to go, then paused, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Whatever caused those tears," he said quietly, "it isn't worth your sorrow. Nothing in this world is worth the sadness of a good woman." Before Sophia could respond, he was gone, striding off into the gathering darkness with the easy confidence of a man who feared nothing the night could bring. She stood watching until his figure disappeared around a corner, then slowly entered the boarding house, her mind filled with thoughts of blue eyes and unexpected kindness. Inside, Mrs. Holloway greeted her with a mixture of concern and curiosity. The older woman had been a widow for 15 years and had converted her large home into a boarding house after her husband's death. She was kind but prone to gossip, and Sophia knew her arrival with Zachary Nash would not go unremarked upon. "Evening, Miss Vance, Mrs. Holloway said, looking up from her knitting. "I was beginning to worry. You're usually home before dark." "I lost track of time," Sophia explained, hanging her shawl on the peg by the door. Mrs. Holloway's sharp eyes missed nothing. "I saw you had company for your walk home," she observed, her tone carefully neutral but her expression alight with interest. Sophia felt a blush creep into her cheeks. "Mr. Nash was kind enough to escort me, yes. There are cattle drivers in town tonight." "Indeed there are, Mrs." Holloway nodded, returning to her knitting. Very considerate of Mr. Nash. Not many men would take such care with a lady's reputation. There was more meaning in the words than was spoken aloud, and Sophia felt a flash of irritation. It was simply a gentlemanly gesture, nothing more, she said firmly. Mrs. Holloway's needles clicked rhythmically. Of course, dear. Though I must say it's the first time I've seen Zachary Nash acting the gentleman for anyone. He keeps to himself, that one. Has ever since he came to Fort Garland 5 years ago. Sophia's curiosity was piqued despite herself. He's not from here originally? Texas, I believe, Mrs. Holloway said. Came up with a herd of cattle and decided to stay. Bought the old Simmons place north of town and turned it into one of the finest ranches in the territory. Works harder than any 3 men but doesn't socialize much. Some folks find him standoffish. And what do you think of him? Sophia asked before she could stop herself. Mrs. Holloway's hands stilled and she looked up at Sophia with shrewd eyes. I think he's a man with ghosts like most who come west, but a good man nonetheless, pays his debts, keeps his word, and I've never seen him raise a hand in anger, even when provoked. In these parts, that counts for something. Sophia nodded, absorbing this information. Well, I should retire. Tomorrow will be a busy day with the children. There's stew keeping warm on the stove if you're hungry, Mrs. Holloway offered. Thank you, but I'm not particularly hungry this evening. Mrs. Holloway's expression softened. Are you feeling unwell, dear? You look a bit pale. Just tired, Sophia assured her, not wishing to discuss the emotional turmoil of the day. Good night, Mrs. Holloway. As Sophia climbed the stairs to her small room on the 2nd floor, her thoughts returned to the letter from her sister and the news it contained. Thomas was married. The wound was fresh again, but somehow it didn't hurt quite as much as it had earlier. Perhaps it was the passage of time, or perhaps it was the unexpected kindness of a rough-hewn rancher with gentle eyes. That night, Sophia dreamed not of Boston and the life she'd left behind, but of open plains and endless skies, and a man whose quiet strength offered shelter from the storm. Morning dawned clear and bright, the crisp autumn air carrying the scent of pine from the distant mountains. Sophia woke earlier than usual, feeling refreshed despite the emotional upheaval of the previous day. She dressed with care in a simple green dress that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes, pinned her chestnut hair into a neat chignon, and headed downstairs for breakfast. Mrs. Holloway was already in the kitchen, the sleeves of her black dress rolled up as she kneaded dough for the day's bread. Good morning, Miss Vance, she greeted. You're up early today. I have some preparations to finish before school, Sophia explained, accepting a cup of strong coffee from the older woman. We're starting a new unit on American history and I want to have everything ready. Mrs. Holloway smiled approvingly. The children are lucky to have you as their teacher. My Harold says your lessons are the highlight of his day. Sophia felt a rush of pleasure at the compliment. Harold Holloway was a bright 10-year-old with a quick mind and quicker tongue, one of 27 students who attended the Fort Garland school. The children ranged in age from 6 to 16, and teaching them all simultaneously was a challenge Sophia relished. Harold is a joy to teach, she said sincerely. He has a natural curiosity that makes my job easier. After a quick breakfast of bread and jam, Sophia gathered her materials and headed for the schoolhouse. The town was already stirring to life, shopkeepers opening their establishments, ranch hands riding in for supplies, and women hanging laundry to dry in the bright morning sun. Fort Garland was a modest settlement, established around the military fort that gave it its name, but it had grown in recent years as more settlers moved west in search of land and opportunity. As Sophia approached the schoolhouse, she noticed a figure standing near the entrance, tall, broad-shouldered, unmistakable even from a distance. Zachary Nash. Her steps faltered momentarily, then resumed at a slightly quicker pace. What was he doing here so early? He turned at the sound of her approach, and Sophia was struck anew by the intensity of his blue eyes. They seemed to capture the very essence of the Colorado sky, deep and clear and somehow infinite. Good morning, Mr. Nash, she greeted him, striving for a tone of professional courtesy that belied the sudden fluttering in her stomach. Miss Vance, he responded, removing his hat. In the clear light of morning, Sophia could see details she'd missed the previous evening, a small scar that bisected his left eyebrow, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of long days under the unforgiving western sun. "Is there something I can help you with?" she asked, unlocking the schoolhouse door. Zachary shifted his weight, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "I wanted to apologize for intruding on your privacy yesterday," he said finally. "It wasn't my place to witness your distress." Sophia felt a rush of embarrassment at the reminder of her breakdown, but there was no judgment in Zachary's expression, only concern. "There's no need for apology," she assured him, pushing open the door and stepping inside. She hesitated, then added, "Would you like to come in? The children won't arrive for another hour." He followed her into the schoolhouse, his presence seeming to fill the modest space. In the morning light, the room looked cheerful and inviting, rows of desks facing the teacher's larger desk at the front, a blackboard covering most of one wall, shelves lined with books, and colorful maps hanging from another wall. "It's changed since I was last in here," Zachary observed, looking around with interest. "Brighter." "You've been to the school before?" Sophia asked, placing her materials on the desk. A shadow of a smile crossed his face. "Not since I was 16, and not willingly even then." Old Mr. Peterson was the teacher back then, ruler in one hand and Bible in the other. Sophia tried to imagine Zachary as a reluctant student and found the image oddly endearing. "Were you a troublemaker, Mr. Nash?" she asked, a teasing note entering her voice. "Let's just say Mr. Peterson and I had differing opinions on the importance of formal education versus practical experience," he replied, the shadow smile blooming into something more genuine. The transformation was remarkable. His entire face lightened, years seeming to fall away as dimples appeared in his tanned cheeks. Sophia found herself momentarily breathless at the sight. "And which do you value more now, with the benefit of hindsight?" she asked, genuinely curious. He considered the question seriously. "Both have their place. A man needs to know how to read and cipher, but he also needs to know how to read the sky before a storm and calculate the odds of survival in a hard winter." He paused, looking at her directly. "I respect what you do here, Miss Vance. Opening minds to possibilities beyond these planes." The sincerity in his voice touched Sophia deeply. "Thank you, Mr. Nash. That means a great deal coming from someone who understands the realities of life out here." An awkward silence fell between them, broken when Zachary cleared his throat and reached into his pocket. "I actually came for another reason," he said, withdrawing a small object. "Found this by the steps last night, thought it might be yours." He held out his hand, and in his palm lay a small silver locket, the very one Sophia had worn yesterday and noticed missing this morning. She'd assumed it had fallen off somewhere between the schoolhouse and the boarding house. "My locket!" she exclaimed, reaching for it with relief. "I was so worried it was lost for good." Their fingers brushed as she took the locket from him, and Sophia felt a jolt of awareness at the brief contact. Zachary must have felt it too, for he withdrew his hand quickly, as if burned. "It's important to you," he observed, not a question but a statement. Sophia nodded, cradling the locket in her palm. "It was my mother's. She gave it to me before she died. I was 14. She hesitated, then added softly, "It's all I have left of her." Understanding filled Zachary's eyes, the understanding of someone who knew loss intimately. "I'm glad I found it then." "As am I," Sophia said warmly. "Thank you for bringing it back to me," he nodded, seeming suddenly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I should let you prepare for your day," he said, replacing his hat. "The children will be arriving soon." "Yes, of course," Sophia agreed, though a part of her was reluctant to see him go. "Thank you again, Mr. Nash." He paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "Zach," he said quietly. "My friends call me Zach." Before Sophia could respond, he was gone, leaving her with a silver locket in her hand and a strange feeling of anticipation in her heart. The school day passed in a blur of activity recitations, arithmetic problems, history lessons, and the 1,000 little moments of discovery that made teaching worthwhile. By the time the last student departed, waving goodbye as they ran to meet waiting parents or older siblings, Sophia was pleasantly exhausted. She was gathering her belongings when a shadow fell across the doorway. Looking up, she expected to see a student who had forgotten something. Instead, Sheriff Daniel Miller stood there, his weathered face grim beneath his gray mustache. "Sheriff Miller," Sophia greeted him, immediately concerned by his serious expression. "Is something wrong?" The sheriff removed his hat, revealing thinning gray hair. "Afternoon, Miss Vance. I'm afraid I have some bad news. There's been an incident at the creek crossing just north of town." Sophia's heart clenched with sudden dread. "What kind of incident?" "Robbery gone wrong," Sheriff Miller explained, his voice heavy with regret. Stage was carrying the monthly payroll for the silver mine. 3 men tried to take it, but the guard put up a fight. Shots were fired. "Was anyone hurt?" Sophia asked, though she could tell from the sheriff's expression that the news was worse than that. 2 passengers were killed: a drummer from Denver and a young woman traveling to visit family in Santa Fe. He paused, his eyes filled with genuine sorrow. "The guard was shot as well, but he'll recover. One of the robbers was killed, another wounded and captured. The third escaped." Sophia sank into her chair, shocked by the violence that had occurred so close to the peaceful town she'd come to call home. "How terrible," she whispered. "Those poor people." Sheriff Miller nodded grimly. "The reason I'm telling you this, Miss Vance, is that we don't know if the third robber is still in the area. Until he's caught, I'm advising everyone to take extra precautions. Don't travel alone, keep your doors locked at night, and report anything suspicious immediately." "Of course," Sophia agreed, a chill running through her at the thought of a desperate criminal lurking nearby. "Thank you for the warning, Sheriff." After the sheriff departed, Sophia finished gathering her things with trembling hands. The news of the robbery and murders had shaken her deeply, reminding her that beneath the beauty and promise of the West lay dangers she'd never faced in Boston. She was locking the schoolhouse door when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Turning, she saw Zachary riding toward her on a magnificent black stallion. He reined in the horse a few feet away, his expression concerned. "Miss Vance," he greeted her, dismounting in one fluid motion. "I just heard about the stagecoach. Sheriff Miller is advising everyone to take precautions." "He just left," Sophia confirmed, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. "It's dreadful, isn't it? Those poor people just going about their business, and now—" Zachary stepped closer, his presence oddly reassuring. "I'd like to escort you home, if that's acceptable." "These aren't times for a lady to be walking alone." Sophia nodded gratefully. "I would appreciate that very much, Mr. Nash." "Zach," he reminded her gently. A small smile touched her lips despite the somber circumstances. "Zach," she repeated, the name feeling strangely intimate. "And you may call me Sophia if you wish." He offered his arm and she took it, finding comfort in his solid strength. They walked in silence for a few moments, the black stallion following obediently behind them. "Do you think they'll catch him?" Sophia asked finally. "The robber who escaped?" Zachary's expression hardened. "They'd better. Men like that bring nothing but destruction wherever they go." There was something in his tone, a personal edge to the words that made Sophia glance up at him curiously. "You sound as though you have experience with such men." He didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've seen what happens when lawlessness goes unchecked," he said finally. "It's not something I care to see again." They reached the boarding house all too soon, and Sophia found herself reluctant to part from him. "Thank you for your escort, Zach," she said, withdrawing her hand from his arm. "It was no trouble," he assured her, then hesitated, seeming to debate with himself before speaking again. "Sophia, would you allow me to call on you properly, perhaps this Sunday afternoon?" The invitation was unexpected but not unwelcome. Sophia felt a fluttering of anticipation in her chest. "I would like that very much." she answered honestly. A smile transformed his features once more, and Sophia found herself thinking that Zachary Nash was truly handsome when he smiled not in the polished way of Eastern gentlemen, but with a rugged authenticity that spoke of character rather than mere appearance. "Sunday afternoon, then," he confirmed, tipping his hat before mounting his horse. "Take care, Sophia." "And you, Zach," she replied, watching as he rode away, his straight back and confident seat speaking of years in the saddle, Mrs. Holloway was waiting inside, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "I heard about the stagecoach," she said. "Terrible business. Are you all right, dear? You look a bit flushed." "I'm fine," Sophia assured her, removing her shawl. "Mr. Nash was kind enough to escort me home." "Was he now?" Mrs. Holloway's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's twice in 2 days. People will start to talk." "Let them," Sophia said with uncharacteristic boldness. "He's been a perfect gentleman." Mrs. Holloway's expression softened. "So he has, and it's about time that man found some happiness." "He's been alone too long." "We're merely acquaintances," Sophia protested, though her heart beat a little faster at the older woman's implication. "For now," Mrs. Holloway said with a knowing smile. "But I've lived long enough to recognize the look of a man with serious intentions. Mark my words, Zachary Nash didn't escort you home out of mere courtesy." Sophia couldn't quite suppress the smile that tugged at her lips. "He's asked to call on me Sunday," she admitted. Mrs. Holloway looked pleased. "Well then, we'll have to make sure you look your best, won't we? That blue dress of yours brings out the gold in your eyes. You should wear that." As Sophia climbed the stairs to her room, her thoughts were a confused jumble of emotions: sorrow for the victims of the stagecoach robbery, lingering hurt from Thomas's betrayal, and a new, tentative hope centered around a pair of blue eyes and a rare, transformative smile. She took out her journal and began to write, trying to make sense of the tumultuous events of the past 2 days. As the words flowed onto the page, she realized that somewhere between yesterday's tears and today's invitation, something fundamental had shifted within her. For the first time since arriving in Fort Garland, Sophia felt not like a visitor passing through, but like someone who might, in time, belong. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. News of the stagecoach robbery dominated conversations throughout Fort Garland, with rumors and speculation running rampant. The captured robber had been identified as Jed Hawkins, a drifter known for frequenting saloons in several Colorado towns, but he refused to reveal the identity of his escaped accomplice. Sheriff Miller and a posse had tracked the third robber's trail for several miles before losing it in rocky terrain. The lawman assured the townspeople that the criminal had likely fled the area, but he maintained his warning about taking precautions, particularly after dark. For Sophia, the days were filled with teaching, and the evenings with preparation for her Sunday visit with Zachary. Despite her protests that it was merely a friendly call, Mrs. Holloway insisted on helping her prepare as if for a formal courtship. "A man doesn't ask to call on a lady unless he has honorable intentions," the older woman insisted as she pressed Sophia's blue dress on Saturday evening. "Especially a man like Zachary Nash. He's not one for social niceties unless he means something by them." Sophia found herself both nervous and excited as Sunday dawned clear and mild, perfect weather for the outing Zachary had proposed. They would take a drive through the countryside, followed by a picnic lunch he would provide. It was a traditional courting activity, proper and respectable, yet the prospect filled Sophia with a girlish anticipation she hadn't felt in years. She dressed with care in the blue dress Mrs. Holloway had recommended, arranging her hair in a becoming style that softened the usual severity of her schoolteacher's chignon. When she descended the stairs, Mrs. Holloway nodded approvingly. "You look lovely, dear," the older woman said warmly, "like a spring morning." "Thank you for your help," Sophia replied, genuinely grateful for the motherly guidance Mrs. Holloway had provided. "I'm rather nervous, which seems silly." "Not silly at all," Mrs. Holloway assured her. It shows you care about the impression you make. That's never a bad thing. A knock at the door announced Zachary's arrival, precisely at the appointed time of 1 o'clock. Mrs. Holloway answered, ushering him into the parlor where Sophia waited. Zachary stood framed in the doorway, and Sophia's breath caught at the sight of him. He was dressed in his Sunday best clean black trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a dark vest that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd clearly shaved for the occasion, revealing a strong jawline usually obscured by stubble. "Miss Vance," he greeted her, his deep voice carrying a note of appreciation as his eyes took in her appearance. "You look beautiful." Sophia felt a blush rise to her cheeks at the direct compliment. "Thank you, Mr. Nash. You look very handsome yourself, Mrs." Holloway watched their exchange with undisguised approval. "You young people enjoy your outing," she said. "But mind you have her back before dark, Mr. Nash. These aren't times for being out after sunset." "Yes, madam," Zachary agreed respectfully. "I'll have Miss Vance home well before nightfall." He offered Sophia his arm, and she took it, feeling the now familiar warmth of his strength through the fabric of his shirt. Outside, a smart buggy waited, hitched to a handsome bay horse. "This is a pleasant surprise," Sophia commented as Zachary helped her into the vehicle. "I didn't know you owned a buggy." "I don't," he admitted, settling beside her and taking up the reins. "Borrowed it from my neighbor, Samuel Peterson. Thought you might prefer it to riding horseback for your first visit to the Nash ranch." "We're going to your ranch?" Sophia asked, surprised and intrigued. Zachary nodded, urging the horse forward. "I thought we could have our picnic by the creek that runs through my property. It's peaceful there, good place to talk without the whole town listening in." As they left Fort Garland behind, the landscape opened up before them, rolling grasslands dotted with stands of aspen and pine, the mountains rising majestically in the distance. Sophia breathed deeply, savoring the clean, pine-scented air and the sense of limitless space that still awed her after months in Colorado. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely. "So different from Massachusetts." "You miss it?" Zachary asked, glancing at her with genuine interest. "The East, I mean." Sophia considered the question. "I miss certain aspects, the cultural amenities, the established society, but there's something compelling about the West, a sense of possibility that doesn't exist back east, where everything is already determined." "That's what brought most of us here," Zachary agreed. "The chance to build something of our own on our own terms." Their conversation flowed easily as the buggy traveled north along a well-maintained road. Zachary pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area, revealing a depth of knowledge about the land and its history that impressed Sophia. After about 30 minutes, they turned onto a narrower track that led toward a cluster of buildings in the distance. As they drew closer, Sophia saw a substantial ranch house built of sturdy logs, a large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings, all well-maintained and speaking of prosperity. "Welcome to the Lazy Inn," Zachary said as they approached, a note of pride in his voice. "It's wonderful," Sophia replied honestly, taking in the picturesque setting with its backdrop of mountains and foreground of green pastures where cattle grazed. "You've built something remarkable here." "It's been a labor of love," he admitted, directing the buggy past the main house and toward a copse of trees that marked the course of a creek. "Though it's still a work in progress." They stopped in a shady spot near the creek, where the sound of running water provided a soothing backdrop. Zachary helped Sophia down from the buggy, his hands strong and sure at her waist. For a moment he held her there, their faces close enough that Sophia could see flecks of gray in his blue eyes. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "I have a basket prepared," he said, reaching into the back of the buggy to retrieve a large picnic basket. "Nothing fancy, but filling." He spread a blanket on the grass beneath a large cottonwood tree, and they settled onto it with the picnic between them. Sophia watched in amazement as Zachary unpacked a veritable feast: fried chicken, potato salad, fresh bread, apple pie, and a bottle of lemonade. "Did you prepare all this yourself?" she asked, impressed by the spread. A hint of color touched his cheeks. My housekeeper, Mrs. Jimenez, helped. She's been with me since I bought the ranch came with the property, you might say. Her husband, Miguel, is my foreman. They ate amid comfortable conversation, Zachary sharing stories of ranch life and Sophia relating amusing anecdotes about her students. As the meal progressed, Sophia found herself relaxing in his company, charmed by his dry wit and thoughtful observations. May I ask you something personal? She ventured after a comfortable lull in the conversation. Zachary nodded, his expression open. You can ask. I might not answer, but you can ask. Why did you leave Texas? The question had been on her mind since Mrs. Holloway mentioned his origins. Was it simply for opportunity, or was there another reason? A shadow crossed his face, and for a moment, Sophia thought he might indeed decline to answer. Then he sighed, his gaze moving to the distant mountains. I left because there was nothing to keep me there, he said finally, his voice quiet but steady. My parents died in a fever epidemic when I was 18. I had no siblings, no other family to speak of. I worked cattle drives for a few years, saved my money, then decided to try my hand at ranching on my own terms. I'm sorry about your parents, Sophia said softly, understanding all too well the pain of losing family. He acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. It was a long time ago. But sometimes I think that's why this place means so much to me. It's not just a ranch, it's proof that I could build something lasting out of loss. The simple honesty of his words touched Sophia deeply. Here was a man who understood grief not as something to be hidden away, but as a foundation upon which to build a meaningful life. I understand completely, she told him, then found herself sharing her own story, her mother's death from consumption, her father's subsequent decline into alcoholism, and her decision to become a teacher to support herself and her younger sister. And what brought you to Fort Garland specifically? Zachary asked. There must be schools needing teachers closer to Boston. Sophia hesitated, the pain of Thomas's betrayal still fresh despite the passage of time. But Zachary had been honest with her, and she felt she owed him the same courtesy. I came west because I needed a fresh start, she admitted. I was engaged to be married Thomas Blackwell, a banker's son with excellent prospects. We had known each other since childhood, and I believed we would build a life together. She paused, gathering her courage to continue. 3 weeks before the wedding, I discovered he had been unfaithful with my cousin. When confronted, he admitted it wasn't the first time. He said he cared for me, but couldn't imagine being faithful to one woman for the rest of his life. Anger flashed in Zachary's eyes. The man's a fool, he said flatly. Sophia smiled sadly. Perhaps, or perhaps merely honest about his nature. In any case, I broke the engagement and applied for teaching positions as far from Boston as possible. Fort Garland was the first to respond. And is that what had you in tears the other day? Zachary asked perceptively. Something to do with this Thomas? Sophia nodded, somewhat surprised by his insight. My sister wrote to inform me he's married, to another woman not my cousin, interestingly enough. It shouldn't have affected me the way it did. I don't love him anymore if I ever truly did, but it brought back all the humiliation, the sense of not being enough. Not being enough, Zachary repeated, his tone incredulous. Sophia, look at me. She raised her eyes to his, startled by the intensity she found there. You are more than enough, he said firmly. You're extraordinary. Any man would be blessed to have your heart, and Thomas Blackwell is the poorest kind of fool for not recognizing that. The conviction in his voice was overwhelming. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes, but these were different from the bitter tears she'd shed in the schoolhouse. These were tears of healing, of acceptance, of the profound relief that came with being truly seen. Thank you, she whispered, unable to find more adequate words. Zachary reached across the picnic blanket, taking her hand in his. His palm was calloused from years of ranch work, but his touch was gentle as his fingers enclosed hers. I'm not a man of many words, Sophia, he said quietly. but I want you to know that I admire you greatly, your courage in starting fresh, your dedication to your students, your kindness. I've watched you since you came to Fort Garland, and each day I've found something new to respect." Sophia's heart pounded at the earnest declaration. "I admire you as well, Zach," she confessed. "Your integrity, your work ethic, the way you've created something meaningful here." They sat in silence for a moment, hands still joined, the only sounds the babbling of the creek and the rustle of leaves overhead. Then, with reluctance, Zachary released her hand and began packing away the remains of their picnic. "I should show you around the ranch before we head back," he said, rising and offering his hand to help her up. Sophia accepted his assistance, feeling a curious mixture of contentment and anticipation as they walked together toward the main house. Whatever was developing between them felt different from her relationship with Thomas, deeper, more authentic, built on mutual respect rather than social expectation. As the afternoon progressed, Sophia was introduced to Mrs. Jimenez, a cheerful Mexican woman who clearly adored Zachary, and Miguel, the serious, competent foreman who managed the ranch's day-to-day operations alongside Zachary himself. She met several of the ranch hands, all of whom treated her with respectful curiosity, clearly wondering about their boss's interest in the schoolteacher. The tour concluded at the corral where several young horses frolicked, their movements fluid and powerful. "They're beautiful," Sophia commented, watching a particularly spirited chestnut colt race around the enclosure. "Quarter horses," Zachary explained, pride evident in his voice. "Best cutting horses in the territory. I've been breeding them for 3 years now, and this year's foals are the strongest yet." As they stood watching the horses, a comfortable silence between them, Sophia realized that she felt more at peace than she had in months. There was something about Zachary Nash that made her feel secure, valued, and understood qualities she hadn't even realized were missing from her relationship with Thomas. All too soon, it was time to return to Fort Garland. As promised, Zachary had her back at the boarding house well before sunset, though Sophia found herself wishing the day could have lasted longer. "Thank you for a wonderful afternoon," she said as he helped her down from the buggy. "I enjoyed seeing your ranch." "I'd like to see you again," Zachary said directly. "Perhaps dinner at the hotel restaurant on Friday evening, if you'd be comfortable with that." "I would like that very much," Sophia replied, pleased by the invitation. He smiled, the expression transforming his features once more. "Until Friday, then," he said, tipping his hat before climbing back into the buggy. Sophia watched him drive away, a warm feeling of anticipation settling in her chest. For the first time since arriving in Fort Garland, she felt that she might be exactly where she was meant to be. The following week brought unexpected challenges that tested the fragile connection forming between Sophia and Zachary. On Monday afternoon, as school was dismissing, Sheriff Miller arrived with troubling news. "The third robber has been spotted near Alamosa," he informed Sophia gravely. "Witness descriptions match a man named Luke Harmon, bad character with a history of violent crime. I'm concerned he might circle back this way." "Should we be worried?" Sophia asked, glancing at her departing students with concern. The sheriff's weathered face was grim. "Just cautious, Miss Vance. I've sent telegrams to neighboring towns, and we have men watching the main roads. But it wouldn't hurt to have someone escort you home for the next few days." As if conjured by the conversation, Zachary appeared in the doorway, his expression concerned as he took in the sheriff's serious demeanor. "Everything all right?" he asked, stepping into the schoolroom. Sheriff Miller nodded a greeting. "Nash, just updating Miss Vance on the situation with that escaped robber. Luke Harmon name mean anything to you?" A shadow crossed Zachary's face so quickly that Sophia might have imagined it had she not been watching him closely. "Can't say it does," he replied evenly. "He's been spotted near Alamosa," the sheriff confirmed. "Thought folks should know." After Sheriff Miller departed, Zachary offered to walk Sophia home, an offer she gratefully accepted. As they walked through the bustling streets of Fort Garland, Sophia couldn't help noticing a tension in Zachary that hadn't been present during their Sunday outing. "Is everything all right?" she asked gently. "You seem troubled." He glanced down at her, his blue eyes shadowed. "Just concerned about this Harmon character. Men like that are unpredictable when cornered." There was something in his tone, a personal edge that echoed their previous conversation about lawlessness, that made Sophia wonder if there was more to his concern than he was sharing. But she didn't press, sensing his reluctance to elaborate. When they reached the boarding house, Zachary hesitated before taking his leave. "Sophia," he said, his voice low and serious, "promise me you'll be careful until this man is caught. Don't go anywhere alone, especially after dark." "I promise," she assured him, touched by his concern. "Will I still see you Friday for dinner?" "Nothing could keep me away," he replied, the tension in his face easing somewhat. "I'll call for you at 6. The next few days passed in a blur of teaching, preparation, and growing anticipation for Friday evening. Sophia found herself thinking of Zachary at odd moments, remembering the warmth of his hand holding hers, the rare smile that transformed his face, the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. On Wednesday afternoon, as Sophia was reviewing arithmetic with her older students, the schoolhouse door burst open without warning. A collective gasp rose from the children as a stranger stumbled in, a ragged man with wild eyes and several days' growth of beard. Blood stained his tattered coat, and in his trembling hand he clutched a revolver. "Nobody move," he shouted, his voice ragged and desperate. "Anyone tries anything, they'll get a bullet." Sophia rose slowly from her desk, heart pounding but mind remarkably clear. "Children," she said calmly, "remain in your seats. Everything will be fine." The intruder's bloodshot eyes fixed on her. "You the teacher?" "I am," Sophia confirmed, fighting to keep her voice steady. "These are my students. They're just children. Whatever you want, please don't frighten them." A harsh laugh escaped the man. "Bit late for that, ain't it? Name's Luke Harmon, madam, and I expect you've heard of me. I need a place to hide, food, and medical attention. Got shot during a misunderstanding." Sophia's blood ran cold at the confirmation of the man's identity, but she maintained her outward composure. 27 children depended on her courage. "Mr. Harmon," she said, her teacher's voice firmly in place, "I'll help you however I can, but first I need to send these children home." "They can't help you and they shouldn't witness this." Harmon's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "So they can run straight to the sheriff. I ain't stupid, lady." "Then keep one," Sophia suggested, hating herself for the words even as she spoke them. "The oldest. Harold Holloway can stay while the others go. He's capable and level-headed." She glanced at Harold, silently apologizing for volunteering him, but the boy met her gaze with surprising steadiness, a wisdom beyond his 10 years in his solemn eyes. Harmon considered this, then nodded curtly. "Fine. The boy stays. Rest of you get out. And if I see a deputy coming this way, the teacher and the kid both get bullets. Understand?" The children filed out in terrified silence, many in tears. Sophia maintained her calm exterior, offering reassuring smiles and gentle touches as they passed, but inside, fear clawed at her chest. Once the last child had gone, Harmon slumped into a chair, revolver still trained on Sophia and Harold. "I need bandages," he muttered, gesturing to the blood seeping through his coat. "And whiskey if you got it." "We have a first aid kit," Sophia replied, moving slowly toward the cabinet where medical supplies were kept. "Harold, would you fetch the water pitcher, please?" The boy moved carefully, his young face pale but determined. As he passed Sophia's desk, he cast a meaningful glance at the window, and Sophia understood his silent message. The window faced the main street. If Harmon's attention wavered, one of them might be able to signal for help. For the next hour, Sophia tended to Harmon's wound, a bullet graze across his ribs that looked painful but not life-threatening. Throughout the process, she kept up a steady stream of conversation, partly to distract him from pain and partly to establish a human connection that might protect her and Harold if the situation deteriorated. "How did you come to be injured, Mr. Harmon?" she asked as she applied a clean bandage to his side. He grimaced, eyes slightly unfocused from pain and exhaustion. "Posse caught up to me near a Lamosa. Got away, but not before one of them winged me." "And you came to Fort Garland. That seems risky given the circumstances." Harmon's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "Got unfinished business here, someone I need to see before I head south to Mexico." A chill ran through Sophia at the cold determination in his voice. This man had already killed during the stagecoach robbery. Whoever he sought in Fort Garland was likely in grave danger. "Perhaps I know this person," she suggested carefully. "Fort Garland is a small town." Harmon laughed harshly. "Oh, you know him all right. Everyone around here knows Zachary Nash." The name hit Sophia like a physical blow. "Mr. Nash, what business could you possibly have with him?" "Old business," Harmon replied, his expression darkening. "From Texas. Nash might call himself a respectable rancher now, but I know what he really is, and I aim to make sure everyone else knows too." Before Sophia could respond, a commotion erupted outside, voices shouting, boots pounding on the wooden walkway. Harmon lurched to his feet, grabbing Harold roughly and pressing the revolver to the boy's head. "Looks like your students didn't keep their mouths shut after all," he snarled, backing toward the rear door with Harold as a shield. "Come here, teacher. You're coming with us." Sophia had no choice but to obey, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a plan. Outside, Sheriff Miller's voice rang out, calling for Harmon to surrender. "3 hostages are better than 2, Harmon muttered, more to himself than to Sophia. "Especially if one of them is Nash's woman." They slipped out the back door into the small yard behind the schoolhouse. A horse was tethered there, evidence that Harmon had planned his invasion of the school with some forethought. With surprising strength for an injured man, he forced Sophia and Harold onto the horse, mounted behind them, and kicked the animal into motion. They rode hard toward the hills east of town, Harmon keeping the horse to wooded areas where pursuit would be difficult. Sophia clung to Harold, trying to protect the boy from the jolting ride while her mind whirled with fear and confusion. Why did Harmon want revenge on Zachary? What had happened in Texas? After what seemed like hours but was likely less than one, Harmon reined in the exhausted horse at a small cabin hidden among the pines. He forced his captives inside, securing the door behind them. "What now, Mr. Harmon?" Sophia asked, trying to keep her voice level for Harold's sake. "The sheriff will be organizing a search party. They'll find us eventually." "By then it won't matter," Harmon replied, checking his revolver. "Once Nash learns I've got you, he'll come alone. He'll have no choice." "You're using us as bait," Sophia realized aloud, horror washing through her. "But why? What did Mr. Nash ever do to you?" Harmon's face contorted with rage. "He killed my brother, shot him down like a dog in the streets of San Antonio, then ran north before he could face justice." Sophia shook her head, unable to reconcile this accusation with the honorable man she knew. "There must be some mistake. Mr. Nash is a respected rancher, not a murderer." "Ask him yourself when he gets here," Harmon spat, moving to the cabin's single window to peer out at the gathering dusk. "Ask him about Jake Harmon and the San Antonio bank robbery of '69. See what he says then." Harold, who had remained admirably calm throughout their ordeal, spoke up unexpectedly. "My pa says Mr. Nash is the most honest man in the county," he said, his young voice steady despite his obvious fear. "If he shot someone, that person must have deserved it." Harmon rounded on the boy, rage twisting his features, and Sophia stepped protectively in front of Harold. "He's just a child," she said quickly. "He doesn't understand the situation." The outlaw subsided, turning back to the window with a muttered curse. Sophia guided Harold to a rough bench in the corner of the cabin, sitting beside him with an arm around his thin shoulders. "You're being very brave," she whispered. "Just stay quiet and follow my lead. We'll get through this." As darkness fell, Sophia's fear grew, not just for herself and Harold but for Zachary. If he came looking for them, and she had no doubt he would be walking into Harmon's trap. The thought of him being hurt, or worse, because of her made Sophia's heart clench painfully. She must have dozed despite her fear, for she was startled awake by a sound outside the cabin, a twig snapping, then silence. Harold was asleep against her shoulder, his breathing deep and regular. Harmon sat by the door, revolver in hand, tense and alert. "He's here," the outlaw whispered, a terrible anticipation in his voice. "Right on schedule." Before Sophia could respond, a voice called from outside, deep, familiar, and beloved. "Harmon, I know you're in there. Let the boy and the lady go. This is between you and me. Zachary." Sophia's heart leapt at the sound of his voice, even as fear for his safety twisted in her stomach. "Come in unarmed, Nash," Harmon called back. "Hands where I can see them, then maybe we'll talk about letting your woman and the kid go." "I'm coming in," Zachary replied evenly. "Don't do anything stupid, Luke. You're in enough trouble already." The cabin door opened slowly, and Zachary stepped inside, hands raised to shoulder height. His eyes found Sophia immediately, relief washing over his features as he saw that she and Harold were unharmed. "You all right?" He asked her, his voice gentle despite the tension vibrating through him. Sophia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Beside her, Harold stirred, waking to the dramatic scene unfolding before him. "Well, ain't this touching?" Harmon sneered, keeping his revolver trained on Zachary. The great Zachary Nash, concerned for his lady love. "Where was that concern when you shot Jake in the back?" Zachary's expression hardened. "I didn't shoot Jake in the back, Luke. He drew on me first in front of 20 witnesses. It was a fair fight." "Liar," Harmon spat. "My brother would never have drawn first. You provoked him, hunted him down like an animal." "Your brother robbed the San Antonio Mercantile Bank," Zachary replied, his voice level but firm. "He killed a teller and wounded a customer. I was a deputy sheriff, Luke. Tracking Jake down was my job." Sophia stared at Zachary in shock. A deputy sheriff? He had never mentioned that part of his past. "You were a lawman?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. Zachary's eyes met hers, filled with regret and something like shame. "For 3 years after my parents died." "Wasn't something I was proud of in the end. Saw too much, did too much that kept me awake at night." "He was a killer with a badge," Harmon interjected bitterly. "Hunting men for bounties, shooting first and asking questions later." "That's not true," Zachary countered, a flash of anger breaking through his controlled exterior. "I always gave men a chance to surrender. Jake chose to draw instead. His death is on his own head, not mine." Harmon's hand tightened on his revolver, his finger moving to the trigger. "Time to find out how you like being on the other end of the gun, Nash." Everything happened with stunning rapidity after that. As Harmon's attention focused fully on Zachary, Sophia acted on instinct, grabbing a heavy iron kettle from the hearth and hurling it at the outlaw's head. Her aim was true. The kettle struck Harmon's shoulder, throwing off his shot. The bullet embedded itself in the cabin wall as Zachary lunged forward, tackling Harmon to the ground. The two men struggled fiercely, rolling across the dirt floor as each fought for control of the revolver. Sophia pushed Harold into the corner, shielding him with her body while searching desperately for something to use as a weapon. A shot rang out, deafening in the confined space of the cabin, and both men went still. For a terrible moment, Sophia couldn't tell who had been hit. Then Zachary rose slowly to his feet, the revolver in his hand, while Harmon remained motionless on the floor, blood spreading across his chest. "Is he?" Sophia couldn't finish the question, her voice failing her. Zachary checked for a pulse, then shook his head grimly. "He's gone." He turned to Sophia and Harold, concern etched on his features. "Are you both all right? Did he hurt either of you?" Harold shook his head, pale but composed, while Sophia managed a shaky, "We're fine, just frightened." Zachary crossed to them in 2 long strides, pulling Sophia into a fierce embrace that conveyed everything words could not relieve: fear, gratitude, love. She clung to him, the events of the day catching up to her in a rush of delayed terror and overwhelming relief. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured against her hair. When I heard what happened at the school, I've never been so afraid." Sophia drew back slightly, looking up into his face with newfound understanding. "You knew him. You knew Harmon was coming for you." It wasn't a question, but Zachary answered anyway, his expression somber. "I suspected. When Sheriff Miller mentioned his name, I remembered. Luke Harmon swore vengeance after his brother's death, but I never thought he'd go through innocent people to get to me." His eyes darkened with self-recrimination. "I should have told you, should have warned you. You couldn't have known he'd target the school," Sophia reasoned, unwilling to let him shoulder blame that wasn't his. "None of this is your fault, Zach." Harold, who had been watching them with the solemn attention of a child trying to understand adult matters, spoke up unexpectedly. "Are you really a deputy sheriff, Mr. Nash?" Zachary's expression softened as he looked at the boy. "I was, Harold. A long time ago in Texas, not anymore." "Did you really shoot his brother?" the boy persisted, curiosity overcoming fear. Zachary sighed, nodding reluctantly. "I did. He'd robbed a bank and killed an innocent man. When I tried to arrest him, he drew on me. I had no choice but to defend myself." Sophia touched his arm gently. "Is that why you left Texas? Because of what happened with Jake Harmon?" "Partly," Zachary admitted. "The shooting was ruled justified, but it took something out of me knowing I'd taken a man's life, even in self-defense. I turned in my badge not long after. Decided I wanted to build something instead of just enforcing the law." He paused, his expression troubled. "I should have told you about that part of my past, Sophia. I was afraid it would change how you saw me." "It does," she replied honestly, her hand moving to cup his cheek. "It helps me understand you better, your integrity, your commitment to doing what's right, even when it's difficult." The relief in his eyes was palpable. Before he could respond, however, the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. Seconds later, Sheriff Miller's voice called out, "Nash." "You in there?" "We're here, Sheriff," Zachary called back. "Miss Vance and the Holloway boy are safe. Harmon's dead." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Sheriff Miller and his deputies took charge of Harmon's body and escorted the trio back to Fort Garland, where a crowd of anxious townspeople awaited news. Mrs. Holloway swept Harold into a tearful embrace, while Mr. Holloway pumped Zachary's hand repeatedly, gratitude evident in every line of his weathered face. Dr. Peterson examined Sophia and Harold, pronouncing them physically unharmed but prescribing rest and hot tea for the shock. Throughout it all, Zachary remained at Sophia's side, a steadfast presence that anchored her amid the chaos. By the time the excitement had died down and statements had been given, it was well past midnight. Zachary escorted Sophia back to the boarding house, both of them exhausted but reluctant to part. "Will you be all right?" he asked as they stood on the porch, his concern evident in the gentle touch of his hand on hers. Sophia nodded, summoning a tired smile. "I will be, thanks to you." "Thanks to your quick thinking with that kettle," he corrected, a hint of admiration in his voice. "You saved my life, Sophia. Harmon would have shot me if you hadn't intervened." "Then we're even," she replied softly, remembering his timely arrival at the cabin. "Though I suspect we'll be having nightmares for a while." Zachary's expression grew serious. "Sophia, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have said earlier." She waited, heart quickening at the intensity in his blue eyes. "When I heard you'd been taken," he continued, his voice low and fervent, "I realized something. Life out here is uncertain, dangerous even. We never know what tomorrow might bring, and I don't want to waste another day not telling you how I feel." He took her hands in his calloused palms warm against her skin. "I love you, Sophia Vance. I think I've loved you since the first time I saw you teaching those children with such passion and dedication. You've brought something into my life I didn't even know was missing: light, joy, purpose beyond the day-to-day work of the ranch." Tears filled Sophia's eyes, not tears of sorrow this time, but of profound joy. "Oh, Zach," she whispered, "I love you too, so much that it frightens me sometimes. When Harmon threatened you, I realized I couldn't bear the thought of losing you." Zachary's face transformed with happiness, the rare, beautiful smile breaking through like sunshine after a storm. With exquisite gentleness, he drew her closer, one hand rising to cup her cheek as his head lowered toward hers. Their first kiss was tender, a delicate exploration that quickly deepened as months of suppressed longing found expression. Sophia's arms wound around his neck as she surrendered to the sensation of being held, being cherished, by the man she loved. When they finally parted, both breathless and slightly dazed, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he murmured reluctantly. "It's late and you need rest." "Will I see you tomorrow?" Sophia asked, unwilling to release him just yet. He nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face with infinite tenderness. "Try to keep me away. School's been canceled for the rest of the week, so I thought perhaps you might like to come out to the ranch. Mrs. Jimenez is already planning a special dinner to celebrate your safe return." "I'd like that very much," Sophia replied, warmth blooming in her chest at the thought of returning to the place that already felt like a second home. With a final, lingering kiss, Zachary took his leave, and Sophia entered the boarding house. Mrs. Holloway was waiting up, her face lined with concern that eased when she saw Sophia's radiant expression. "Well," the older woman said knowingly, "I see something good has come out of this dreadful day after all." Sophia couldn't suppress her smile. "He loves me, Mrs. Holloway, and I love him." "Anyone with eyes could see that, dear," Mrs. Holloway replied, patting Sophia's hand affectionately. "The question is, what happens now?" It was a good question, one that Sophia pondered as she prepared for bed. The events of the day had changed everything, bringing her relationship with Zachary into sharp focus while also revealing aspects of his past she'd never suspected. Yet rather than creating distance, these revelations had only deepened her understanding of the man she loved. As she drifted towards sleep, exhaustion finally overcoming the lingering adrenaline of the day, Sophia's last thought was of Zachary's face as he'd told her he loved her, open, vulnerable, filled with a hope that matched her own. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of change to Sophia's life. School resumed, though for several days, parents escorted their children to and from the building, unwilling to risk another incident despite Sheriff Miller's assurances that the danger had passed. The children themselves treated Sophia with a new sort of awe, particularly the younger ones who had built the schoolhouse siege into a tale of heroism, worthy of the dime novels they secretly read. Zachary became a regular visitor to the schoolhouse, often arriving just as classes dismissed to escort Sophia on walks through town or out to his ranch for dinner. Their courtship, conducted in the open and with proper respect for propriety, nevertheless became the favorite topic of conversation among Fort Garland's residents. "You'd think they'd never seen two people in love before," Sophia commented one Sunday afternoon as they sat together on the front porch of the ranch house, enjoying the mild spring weather. Zachary chuckled, his arm comfortably around her shoulders. "It's not often this town gets a romance to discuss. Cattle prices and weather make for dull conversation after a while." Sophia leaned against him, content in a way she'd never experienced before. The past month had deepened their relationship in ways she couldn't have imagined, each day bringing new discoveries about the man she loved: his dry sense of humor, his gentleness with animals, his unexpected love of poetry, his fundamental decency in all his dealings. "Zach," she said after a comfortable silence, "do you ever regret leaving law enforcement? You were good at it, from what Sheriff Miller says." Zachary considered the question seriously, his fingers absently stroking her arm. "No," he said finally. "Being a lawman changes a man, and not always for the better. I've seen good men become hard, suspicious, unable to see the best in people anymore. I was heading that way myself before I left Texas." He looked out across the ranch, the neat buildings, the grazing cattle, the horses in the corral. "This is better. Creating something, building something that will last. And now, sharing it with you, that's more than I ever dared hope for." His words touched something deep within Sophia, a longing for permanence, for a place to belong, for a future built on love rather than obligation. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked softly, noting her thoughtful expression. Sophia hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I'm thinking about the future, our future." A smile touched his lips. "I've been thinking about that too," he admitted. Gently disentangling himself, he rose from the porch swing and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Sophia Vance," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. "I love you more than I ever thought possible. You've brought joy and light into my life when I'd resigned myself to solitude. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Though she had suspected this moment might come soon, the reality of it, Zachary kneeling before her, his face open and vulnerable with love, brought tears to Sophia's eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Zach. Nothing would make me happier than to be your wife." Joy transformed his features as he rose, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. Their kiss was a promise, a sealing of the commitment they'd just made, full of tenderness and passion and hope for the future they would build together. When they finally separated, Zachary reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "This was my mother's," he explained, opening it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a modest diamond flanked by 2 sapphires. "My father gave it to her when they were courting. I've kept it all these years, waiting for the right woman to wear it." As he slipped the ring onto Sophia's finger, she was struck by the rightness of the moment, not a grand gesture in an elegant Boston parlor, but a sincere promise on the porch of her ranch house with the mountains as witness. "It's beautiful," she said softly, admiring the way the stones caught the late afternoon light. "And it fits perfectly. Like you in my life," Zachary replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Perfect." They decided on a June wedding, long enough to make proper preparations, but soon enough to satisfy hearts that had already waited too long for happiness. Mrs. Holloway immediately appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator, while Mrs. Jimenez began planning a feast that would, she declared, make the whole territory remember the day Senor Zach married his beautiful teacher. As news of their engagement spread through Fort Garland, Sophia was touched by the genuine happiness their announcement seemed to generate. Gifts began arriving at the boarding house: handmade quilts, preserves, small pieces of furniture crafted by the town's woodworker. It was as if the entire community had decided to embrace their union as a symbol of hope and renewal. Even Sophia's students got into the spirit, presenting her with a carefully crafted book of drawings depicting their teacher and Mr. Nash in various romantic scenarios that made Sophia blush and Zachary laugh out loud. "They've captured your smile perfectly," he teased, pointing to a particularly elaborate drawing showing them riding off into a sunset emblazoned with hearts. The weeks leading to the wedding passed in a blur of preparations, teaching, and stolen moments with Zachary that became increasingly precious as their wedding day approached. Sophia wrote to her sister in Boston, sharing her happiness and extending an invitation to the wedding that she knew was unlikely to be accepted given the distance and expense of travel. To her surprise, a telegram arrived 2 weeks before the ceremony. "Will arrive Fort Garland June 10. Stop. Cannot miss my sister's wedding. Stop. Love, Emily. Stop." "Emily's coming," Sophia exclaimed, showing the telegram to Zachary during his evening visit. "I can't believe she's making the journey all the way from Boston," Zachary smiled at her excitement. "I'm glad. Family should be together for important moments." A shadow crossed his face briefly, a reminder of his own lack of family to witness their union. Sensing his thoughts, Sophia took his hand. "You have family now, Zach, me and everyone at the ranch who cares for you, and soon, God willing, we'll build our own family together." The shadow lifted, replaced by a warmth that never failed to make Sophia's heart beat faster. "I like the sound of that," he said softly. "Our family." As June arrived, bringing with it the full bloom of summer, final preparations for the wedding accelerated. The ceremony would take place in the town's small church, followed by a celebration at the Nash Ranch that promised to be the social event of the season. Zachary threw himself into preparations with unexpected enthusiasm, overseeing the construction of long tables for the feast, ensuring the ranch was immaculate, and even ordering special decorations from Denver that arrived on the stagecoach amid much speculation. "You're not supposed to be this involved," Sophia teased him during one of their evening walks. "The groom traditionally just appears on the day, looking handsome and appropriately nervous." "Nothing traditional about us," Zachary replied with a grin. "Besides, this wedding is as much for Fort Garland as it is for us. Might as well give them something worth talking about." Emily arrived as promised on June 10th, 5 days before the wedding. Sophia, who hadn't seen her sister in nearly a year, was struck by how much the 19-year-old had matured, no longer the uncertain girl who had wept at their parting, but a poised young woman with confidence in her bearing. "You look wonderful," Sophia told her as they embraced on the platform of the small Fort Garland station. "Boston clearly agrees with you," Emily laughed, linking her arm through her sister's as they walked toward the waiting buggy. "Boston is Boston proper and predictable. But it's you who's transformed, Sophie. You're positively glowing." "That's what happiness does," Sophia replied simply, unable to contain her joy. "Wait until you meet Zach. He's everything I never knew I wanted." And indeed, when Emily met Zachary that evening at a small dinner Mrs. Holloway had arranged, Sophia had the satisfaction of seeing genuine approval in her sister's eyes. Emily and Zachary took to each other immediately, finding common ground in their shared love of literature and their concern for Sophia's happiness. "He's wonderful," Emily declared later that night as the sisters prepared for bed in Sophia's room. "Nothing like Thomas, thank goodness. There's a substance to him, a genuineness that's rare." "I knew you'd understand," Sophia said, grateful for her sister's endorsement. "He's not what I imagined for myself, but he's exactly what I need." Emily's expression grew serious. "Are you sure about staying here, Sophie? Fort Garland is so remote, so different from everything you've known." Sophia looked out the window at the starlit western sky, so vast and full of possibility. "I'm sure," she said with quiet conviction. "This is where I belong now with Zach, with my students in this community that's accepted me as their own. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Emily squeezed her hand, understanding in her eyes. "Then I couldn't be happier for you, though I will miss you terribly." "You'll visit," Sophia assured her. "And perhaps someday you'll find a reason to come west permanently." Emily laughed, a becoming blush coloring her cheeks. "Perhaps, though I doubt there are many men like your Zachary to be found." The days before the wedding passed in a whirlwind of final preparations. Fittings for Sophia's wedding dress, a creation of pale blue silk that Mrs. Holloway and several other town women had worked on collectively. And joyful anticipation that seemed to infect the entire town. On the morning of June 15th, Sophia woke to brilliant sunshine streaming through her window, a perfect day for a wedding. As she lay there, savoring the knowledge that by sunset she would be Zachary's wife, a profound sense of peace settled over her. The schoolhouse tears that had led to this moment seemed a lifetime ago, the pain of Thomas's betrayal healed by the steadfast love of a man who saw her truly and cherished what he saw. Fort Garland, once a strange and intimidating outpost, had become home in every sense of the word. A knock at her door roused her from these reflections. Emily entered, already dressed for the day, carrying a breakfast tray and wearing an expression of suppressed excitement. "Good morning, bride," she greeted Sophia cheerfully. "I've brought sustenance to get you through the morning. Mrs. Holloway says you need to eat, even if you're too nervous to be hungry." "I'm not nervous," Sophia replied truthfully, accepting the tray. "Just happy, impossibly, wonderfully happy." The morning passed in a flurry of activity, bathing, dressing, arranging hair, and accepting the well wishes of what seemed like every woman in Fort Garland. all of whom found reasons to stop by the boarding house to offer advice or small gifts for the bride. By 2 o'clock, Sophia was ready, standing before the mirror in Mrs. Holloway's parlor in her pale blue wedding dress, her chestnut hair arranged in an elegant coiffure topped with a coronet of wildflowers gathered that morning by her students. "You look beautiful," Emily said softly, adjusting the fall of the skirt. Like a Colorado sunrise, before Sophia could respond, another knock came at the door. Mrs. Holloway answered it, then turned with a surprised expression. "It's Mr. Nash," she said, clearly scandalized. "Says he needs to speak with you, Sophia. I told him it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding, but he insists it's important." Sophia's heart skipped a beat, not from superstitious fear, but from concern. What could be so important that Zachary would risk Mrs. Holloway's displeasure? "It's all right," she assured the older woman. "I'll speak with him, though perhaps in the garden, away from prying eyes." Mrs. Holloway shook her head disapprovingly but led Zachary to the small garden behind the boarding house. Sophia followed, gathering her skirts carefully as she negotiated the narrow back stairs. Zachary stood with his back to her, dressed in a new black suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. At the sound of her approach, he turned, and the expression that crossed his face at the sight of her was one Sophia knew she would remember for the rest of her life: wonder, love, and a humility that suggested he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. "Sophia," he breathed, taking a step toward her before stopping himself. "You're so beautiful." She smiled, anxiety forgotten in the warmth of his gaze. "You look quite handsome yourself. Is everything all right? Mrs. Holloway said you needed to speak with me urgently." Zachary nodded, seeming to recollect his purpose. "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually, but I received some news this morning that couldn't wait until after the ceremony." He reached into his pocket and withdrew an official-looking document. This arrived on the morning stage from Denver. Sophia took the paper, scanning the legal terminology with growing amazement. "This is a deed to the schoolhouse and the surrounding property?" "And the teacher's residence that's going to be built next door," Zachary confirmed, a hint of pride in his voice. "I've been negotiating with the town council for weeks. Fort Garland has needed a proper school building for years, not just that converted storefront. And the teacher that's you should have a home of her own, not a room in a boarding house." Tears filled Sophia's eyes as the implications sank in. "You did this for me, for my students." Zachary took her hands, heedless now of superstition. "For both, for our future. I want you to be able to continue teaching after we're married if that's what you want. This way, you'll have a proper classroom and we'll have a home in town for when ranch business keeps me away overnight." The thoughtfulness of the gesture overwhelmed Sophia. This wasn't a man who expected his wife to abandon her calling for his convenience. This was a partner who understood her passion for teaching and had found a way to honor it while building their life together. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, blinking back joyful tears. "Except that I love you, Zachary Nash, more than I ever thought possible." He smiled, that rare, transformative smile that never failed to quicken her heart. "Save some of those pretty words for the ceremony," he advised, brushing a gentle kiss across her knuckles. "I'll see you at the church in an hour, Miss Vance. I'll be the nervous-looking man waiting at the altar." With that, he was gone, leaving Sophia standing in the garden with a deed in her hand, and her heart so full she thought it might burst. The church was filled to capacity when Sophia arrived, every resident of Fort Garland and surrounding ranches having turned out for the occasion. As the small organ began to play, and Emily preceded her down the aisle as her maid of honor, Sophia's eyes found Zachary waiting for her at the altar, his expression one of such naked adoration that whispers rippled through the congregation. Sheriff Miller, in his role as stand-in for the father Sophia had lost, escorted her down the aisle with obvious pride. When they reached the altar, he placed her hand in Zachary's with a gruff, "Take care of her, Nash," before stepping aside. The ceremony itself was simple but deeply moving. the pastor's words about love and commitment finding perfect resonance in the hearts of the couple before him. When it came time for the vows, Zachary's strong voice carried clearly through the church as he promised to love, honor, and cherish Sophia for all the days of his life. When Sophia spoke her own vows, her voice trembled slightly with emotion, but her conviction was evident to all who witnessed the exchange. As Zachary slipped a simple gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, she saw in his eyes the same certainty she felt in her heart that this union was right, true, and meant to be. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor declared, beaming at the couple. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Nash." Zachary needed no further invitation. With gentle reverence, he drew Sophia into his arms and kissed her, sealing their vows with a tenderness that brought tears to many eyes in the congregation. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors as husband and wife, the church erupted in cheers and applause that followed them out into the bright June sunshine. The celebration at the Nash Ranch, now the Nash family ranch, Sophia reminded herself with wonder, was everything Mrs. Jimenez had promised and more. Tables groaned with food, music filled the air courtesy of a band brought in from Alamosa, and lanterns hung from trees cast a magical glow as dusk fell. Sophia and Zachary moved among their guests hand in hand, accepting congratulations and sharing their joy with those who had come to celebrate with them. When the time came for dancing, Zachary led his bride to the center of the cleared space before the house, taking her in his arms for their first dance as husband and wife. "Happy, Mrs. Nash," he murmured as they moved together to the music. "Completely," she replied, her eyes shining up at him. "And you, more than I ever dreamed possible," he assured her, his arms tightening around her waist. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and find this has all been an elaborate fantasy." Sophia laughed, the sound carrying across the ranch yard and causing several guests to smile at the evident happiness of the bride. "If it's a dream, then we're sharing it, and I have no intention of waking up." As the evening progressed, Sophia found a quiet moment with Emily, who would be returning to Boston the following week. "You'll write often?" Emily asked, linking her arm through her sister's as they watched the dancers. "Every week," Sophia promised, "and you'll come back to visit." "Perhaps for Christmas?" Emily smiled mysteriously. "Sooner than that, I hope. I've received an offer to teach music at a new academy in Denver. I'm considering accepting it." "Emily, that's wonderful," Sophia exclaimed, embracing her sister. "You'd be just a day's journey away by train. We could see each other regularly." "That was part of the appeal," Emily admitted. "Seeing you so happy here, so fulfilled, it's made me reconsider what I want from life. Boston feels stifling after experiencing the West, even briefly." Before Sophia could respond, Zachary appeared at her side, his hand finding its natural place at the small of her back. "Everything all right, ladies? Everything's perfect," Sophia assured him, sharing Emily's news. "We might be seeing a lot more of my sister in the future." Zachary's genuine pleasure at this prospect confirmed once again for Sophia that she had chosen well. This was a man who valued family, who understood the importance of maintaining connections despite the distances that separated loved ones. As the celebration continued around them, Zachary drew Sophia away from the crowds toward a quiet corner of the ranch yard. In the soft glow of lantern light, he took both her hands in his. "I have something for you," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice that Sophia found endearing. "A wedding gift." From his pocket, he withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue paper. Sophia unwrapped it carefully to reveal a delicate silver bracelet adorned with small charms, a book, a horse, a schoolhouse, and a heart. "It's beautiful," she breathed, admiring the craftsmanship. "Did you have it made specially?" Zachary nodded, helping her fasten it around her wrist. "Each charm represents something important to us: your teaching, my ranch, our home, and of course our love." Sophia was touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "I'll treasure it always," she promised, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. Thank you, Zach. He held her close, his eyes reflecting the lantern light and something deeper, a contentment that matched her own. Thank you, Sophia, for seeing beyond the rough exterior to the man beneath. For believing in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself anymore. His words reminded her of that day in the schoolhouse. Was it only 2 months ago? When he had found her crying and offered comfort with an unexpected gentleness that had touched her heart. Do you know what I thought that day you found me in tears? She asked softly. After you left, I wrote in my journal that I'd never met a man who could say so much with so few words. You have a way of cutting through pretense to what really matters. A smile touched his lips. Not always good with words, but I try to mean the ones I choose. That's why they carry such weight, Sophia replied, leaning into his embrace. You've taught me more than words ever could, Zach, about courage, about honor, about what love really means. His eyes darkened with emotion as he recognized his own words from that first meaningful interaction, now reflected back to him with new depth and understanding. I love you, Sophia Nash, he said simply, the 4 words containing all the devotion and commitment she could ever desire. And I love you, she replied, her heart full to overflowing with the joy of the present and the promise of their future together. Today, tomorrow, always. As they rejoined their guests, hands clasped and hearts aligned, Sophia knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not in a place, but in a person. In Zachary's love, she had discovered a sanctuary more secure than any schoolhouse, more nurturing than any classroom, more enduring than any lesson. The tears shed in that schoolhouse months ago had been a beginning, not an end, the first drops of a rain that had nourished the most beautiful flowering of her life. And as she moved through the celebration of their union, Sophia silently thanked whatever fate or providence had brought her to Fort Garland, to that schoolhouse, to the moment when a quiet cowboy had found a tearful teacher and changed both their lives forever. Epilogue: 5 years later, the schoolhouse door opened quietly, admitting a shaft of late afternoon sunlight and the tall figure of Zachary Nash. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene before him with a smile that still, after 5 years of marriage, made Sophia's heart beat faster. At 27, Sophia had grown into her role as Fort Garland's respected teacher and Zachary's beloved wife with a confidence that enhanced her natural beauty. The past 5 years had brought changes to them, both new responsibilities, new joys, new challenges overcome together. Papa. 3-year-old Matthew Nash abandoned his picture book and raced across the schoolroom to be swept up into his father's strong arms. With his mother's hazel eyes and his father's dark hair, Matthew was a perfect blend of his parents, both in appearance and in the determined, curious nature that kept Sophia and Zachary constantly on their toes. "There's my boy," Zachary said, tossing his son into the air and catching him securely, delighting in the child's squeals of laughter. "Have you been helping your mama teach today?" Matthew nodded solemnly. "I showed the little ones their letters. Miss Emily says I'm a natural teacher like Mama." "That you are," Zachary agreed, setting the boy down and crossing to where Sophia sat at her desk, now obviously pregnant with their second child. He bent to kiss her tenderly, one hand resting on the swell of her belly where their daughter, they were certain it was a girl this time, grew stronger each day. "How are my girls today?" Sophia smiled up at him, covering his hand with hers. "We're well. Though your daughter has been practicing her kicks all afternoon. I think she may be a horsewoman like her father. Or a dancer like her Aunt Emily," Zachary suggested, referring to Emily Vance's successful establishment of a dance and music school in Denver, where she now lived permanently. The sisters saw each other regularly, with Emily making the journey to Fort Garland at least once a month to visit her nephew and continue the close relationship the sisters had always shared. "Perhaps both," Sophia laughed, allowing Zachary to help her to her feet. At 7 months pregnant, she found her balance occasionally challenging. Though she continued to teach daily in the schoolhouse Zachary had gifted her on their wedding day. The building had been expanded twice in the past 5 years as Fort Garland grew, attracting more families with the promise of good land and, importantly, an excellent school for their children. The teachers' residence next door had grown as well, with additions to accommodate the Nash family's expansion and frequent visitors. How was the cattle auction? Sophia asked as they gathered their belongings and prepared to walk the short distance to their home. Successful, Zachary replied, lifting Matthew onto his shoulders while carrying Sophia's books and teaching materials. Got fair prices for all the yearlings. The Lazy N is developing quite a reputation for quality stock. Pride colored his voice, and rightly so. Under Zachary's stewardship, the Lazy N had prospered beyond expectations, becoming one of the most successful ranches in Colorado territory. The property had expanded, the herd had grown, and the quarter horses Zachary bred were sought after throughout the West. But more important than material success was the life they had built together, a partnership founded on mutual respect and deepening love. Each day brought new discoveries, new joys shared and challenges faced as one. As they walked home through the streets of Fort Garland, now a thriving community that barely resembled the rough frontier town Sophia had encountered 5 years earlier, they were greeted warmly by neighbors and friends. The Nashes were respected figures in the community, Zachary for his business acumen and fair dealings, Sophia for her dedication to education and her quiet charity work among the less fortunate. Their home, a comfortable blend of practicality and beauty, welcomed them with the delicious aromas of the evening meal prepared by Maria, their housekeeper who came in daily from the ranch to ensure the pregnant Sophia didn't overtax herself. After dinner, as twilight painted the Colorado sky in shades of purple and gold, Zachary and Sophia sat together on their porch swing, Matthew drowsing between them after an energetic day. These quiet moments, with the day's work complete and the night's rest still ahead, were precious to them both, time to simply be together, to share the small details that made up the tapestry of their life together. I received a letter from Thomas today, Sophia mentioned, her head resting comfortably on Zachary's shoulder. Zachary's arm tightened slightly around her. Oh, what does the banker have to say for himself these days? There was no jealousy in the question, only mild curiosity. Thomas Blackwell was firmly part of Sophia's past, and both she and Zachary knew it. After her marriage, Sophia had re-established cautious contact with old Boston acquaintances, including Thomas, who had expressed genuine regret for his past behavior and congratulations on her happiness. His bank is opening a branch in Denver, Sophia explained. He'll be traveling west to oversee the establishment and hoped we might meet during his stay. He expressed particular interest in seeing the school you helped build. Zachary considered this, his fingers absently stroking her arm. Would you like that, to see him again? Sophia thought about the question seriously. I think so, she said finally. Not out of any lingering attachment, but to show him and perhaps myself how completely that chapter of my life is closed. How fully my heart belongs here with you and Matthew and our daughter. Zachary pressed a kiss to the top of her head, understanding in his touch. Then we'll welcome him properly when he comes, show him what real happiness looks like. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, the first stars appearing in the vast Colorado sky. Matthew stirred between them, mumbling something in his sleep that made both parents smile. Sometimes I can hardly believe this is my life, Sophia confessed softly, gazing out at the peaceful scene before them. Teaching children I love, married to a man who cherishes me, expecting our second child, it's more than I ever dared hope for. You deserve every bit of it, Zachary assured her, his voice low and fervent. And more besides. Sophia turned her face up to his, love warming her gaze. Do you remember what you said to me that day in the schoolhouse, when you found me crying? A smile touched his lips. I said a lot of things that day, most of them inadequate. Not inadequate at all, she corrected gently. You said I'd taught you more than words ever could. I didn't understand then what you meant. And now, he asked, curious. Now I understand completely, Sophia replied, her hand finding his in the gathering darkness. Love isn't about words, it's about presence. Being there in the difficult moments as well as the joyful ones. It's about seeing truly and being truly seen. Zachary's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his eyes reflecting starlight and devotion as he bent to kiss her, a kiss that spoke of years shared and decades still to come, of promises kept and new ones made each day, of a love that had begun in unexpected tears and blossomed into enduring joy. When they parted, Matthew still slumbering peacefully between them, Zachary whispered against Sophia's hair, "Thank you for teaching me how to love, Sophia Nash. It's the most valuable lesson of my life." And as they sat together on their porch, surrounded by the fruits of their shared vision, a thriving school, a successful ranch, a beloved child with another on the way, Sophia knew that some lessons couldn't be taught from books or blackboards. The most important ones were learned in moments of vulnerability, in acts of courage, in the daily choice to build a life with someone who saw your true self and loved what they saw. In the end, that was the lesson they had taught each other and would continue teaching through all the years to come.